Greetings everyone, and welcome to your weekly Cyber News show. I'm your host, Hacknuts, and each week we dive into the latest cybersecurity events to keep you informed and up to date with the trends shaping the cyber world. Veda Stila is back and it's been completely rewritten. Version 2.0 has been spotted spreading through hundreds of fake game cheat repositories on GitHub and Reddit, targeting players of games like CS2 with promise of free powerful cheats. The malware, now rewritten from C++ to C with multi-threaded execution and an automatic code morpher that changes its structure between builds, targets browser credentials, cookies, cryptocurrency wallets, Azure tokens, Steam artifacts, FTP and SSH passwords, Telegram and Discord data. Once installed, it adds a Microsoft Defender exclusion, retrieves a second stage payload from Pastebin, and establishes persistence via a scheduled task named System Background Update. What makes this campaign particularly dangerous is the use of Telegram bots and Steam profiles as dead drop resolvers to hide the command and control servers, making takedowns extremely difficult. Researchers from Acronis Threat Research Unit identified the campaign and note that the collapse of other infostealers like Luma and Radamantis has driven demand toward Veda as an affordable replacement with an active development roadmap. North Korean hackers from the Lazarus Group are added again. Cryptocurrency e-commerce platform Bitrefill, which lets users buy gift cards and pay bills with cryptocurrency through partnerships with Amazon, DoorDash, Apple, Uber, Walmart, and others, has confirmed it was breached on March 1st. The initial access originated through a compromised employee laptop from which a legacy credential was exfiltrated. That credential gave the attackers access to a production snapshot containing secrets, which they then used to escalate into the company's broader infrastructure, including parts of its database and certain cryptocurrency wallets. Around 18,500 purchase records were stolen, containing email addresses, crypto payment addresses, and IP address metadata. The breach was only discovered because Bitrefill noticed suspicious purchasing patterns with suppliers. The company says it will absorb the financial losses through its operational capital and has attributed the attack with confidence to Lazarus based on matching tactics, malware, IP addresses, and blockchain activity. Gasworks, the supply chain malware that hides its code inside invisible Unicode characters, is now in its fifth and most expensive wave. Since early March, over 433 components have been compromised through GitHub, NPM, VS Code, and the OpenVSX registry. Attackers are compromising developer accounts, then force-pushing malicious commits that preserve the original commit message, author, and timestamp, meaning repositories appear completely untouched in GitHub's interface. The payload uses Solana blockchain transactions as command and control, queried every 5 seconds for new instructions, making the infrastructure nearly impossible to take down. What's new in this wave is the use of what researchers believe to be LLM-generated cover commits. Each injection is wrapped in a realistic-looking documentation update, version bump, or bug fix, styled to match each specific codebase. AI developer tooling is also being targeted, with malicious extensions mimicking tools for Cloud Code, Codex, and Google Anti-Gravity. The malware steals cryptocurrency wallet data, credentials, SSH keys, and developer environment secrets. Developers should audit their recently updated dependencies immediately. The United States Department of Energy is preparing to release its first ever dedicated cybersecurity strategy. Alex Fitzsimmons, acting director of the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, announced the plan at the McCrary Cyber Summit in Washington. The strategy is designed to supplement the recently published National Cyber Strategy and will focus on strengthening security resilience across the energy sector. Central themes include deepening public-private partnerships so that timely and actionable threat intelligence can reach private operators who are largely responsible for defending their own networks, as well as investigating in AI for cyber defense to harden critical energy infrastructure, including defense-critical assets that may be involved in future conflicts. A release date was not given beyond the word soon. A Georgia man has been charged for running a sophisticated multi-year phishing scheme targeting professional athletes from the NFL and NBA. Kwame Gerald Ford, 34, allegedly posed as an Apple customer service representative, while simultaneously posing as a prominent adult film actress to lure athletes into handing over their Apple ID credentials and MFA codes. Through those Apple accounts, Ford gained access to credit and debit cards and conducted over 2,000 fraudulent transactions. Disturbingly, he also coerced a woman into commercial sex acts with several athletes, arranged her travel, and secretly recorded the encounters, including hacking into one victim's home security cameras. Ford had previously pleaded guilty to a nearly identical scheme in 2019 and was sentenced to prison, but reportedly began reoffending within 2 days of being released on an ankle monitor due to COVID-19. He has pleaded not guilty to dozens of counts, and a judge ordered he be held without bail. The Rhododox botnet has significantly expanded its operations, now targeting 174 vulnerabilities with up to 15,000 exploitation attempts per day, according to new research from BitSight. Active since June 2025, the botnet has evolved considerably. It started by exploiting a handful of known router flaws, and now targets DVRs, NVRs, CCTV systems, and web servers worldwide. What's notable about this campaign is how the operators behave. They rapidly rotate through vulnerabilities, testing and discarding them rather than simply accumulating a bigger list. In early January 2026, the botnet abruptly dropped from targeting around 40 vulnerabilities down to just 2, one of which was the React2 shell flaw, CV 2025-55-18-2. Added just 3 days after it was publicly disclosed. BitSight also debunks several claims circulating in the threat intelligence community about Rhododox, confirming it uses traditional command and control servers and does not operate peer-to-peer as some reports have suggested. Medical technology giant Stryker, maker of surgical tools, orthopedic implants, and hospital systems with over 53,000 employees and $22.6 billion in annual revenue, had nearly 80,000 employee devices wiped remotely on March 11th. Without a single piece of malware being deployed, the attackers, linked to the pro-Palestinian activist group Handala, widely considered a front for Iran-backed Void Manticore, compromised an administrator account and created a new global administrator account in Stryker's Microsoft environment. They then used a legitimate Microsoft Intune wipe command to erase devices between 5 and 8 in the morning UTC. Electronic ordering systems remain offline and customers must place orders manually through sales representative. Stryker has confirmed that medical devices were not affected and remain safe to use. The investigation is being led by Microsoft Detection and Response Team with support from Palo Alto's Unit 42. Handala claims it also exfiltrated 50 terabytes of data, though this has not been independently confirmed. The UK's Companies House, the government agency that operates the corporate registry for all 5 million registered UK businesses, has confirmed a serious security flaw in its web filing service that exposed sensitive company data for approximately 5 months since October 2025. The vulnerability was strikingly simple. A logged-in user could enter any company's registration number, be prompted for an authentication code they didn't have, then press the back button a few times to bypass the check entirely and land directly on the company's private dashboard. From there, they could view and alter director home addresses, email addresses, dates of birth, and even file documents on behalf of the company. The flaw was discovered by business services provider John Hewitt and reported through Tax Policy Associates after Companies House didn't respond to initial contact. The web filing service was taken offline for the weekend while the fix was applied and is now back online. Companies House CEO Andy King has publicly apologized and is urging all UK businesses to check their registered details and filing history for any unauthorized changes. A North Carolina man named Michael Smith has pleaded guilty to orchestrating one of the most audacious music streaming fraud schemes ever prosecuted. Between 2017 and 2024, Smith deployed thousands of bot accounts, at times running as many as 10,000 simultaneously, to stream hundreds of thousands of AI-generated songs across Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube Music. He worked with co-conspirator and the CEO of an AI music company to build up a massive catalog of synthetic tracks, used fake email addresses, purchased in bulk to register the bot accounts, and routed the traffic through VPNs to mimic real listeners. The scheme generated over $8 million in royalty payments that would otherwise have gone to legitimate artists and songwriters. Smith faces up to 5 years in prison. The case is a landmark moment in the music industry battle against AI-generated fraud. Deezer alone reports receiving over 60,000 fully AI-generated tracks per day. In a coordinated international law enforcement operation, authorities have disrupted 4 major botnets: AI Suru, Kimwolf, Jackskid, and Mossad. Together, they infected millions of devices worldwide and were being used to conduct DDoS attacks, credential theft, and proxy abuse. The operation involved agencies from over a dozen countries and resulted in multiple arrests, server seizures, and the takedown of command and control infrastructure. AI Suru and Kimwolf were among the largest Mirai variant botnets currently active, while Jackskid and Mossad had been linked to a cryptocurrency theft and residential proxy abuse respectively. This is considered one of the most significant multi-botnet disruption operation since the takedown of the Quackbot infrastructure in 2023. A former data analyst at a software company had been found guilty of extorting his employer, Brightly Software, for $2.5 million. The analyst, who had legitimate access to company systems as part of his role, used that access to exfiltrate sensitive customer data and then sent anonymous ransom demands threatening to publish the stolen information unless payment was made. The case highlights the persistent insider threat risk, particularly from employees with broad data access, and a fine line between legitimate data access and abuse. The US Department of Justice has announced the disruption of a massive IoT botnet that had infected approximately 3 million devices globally, mostly home routers and smart devices, and had been used to power a large-scale residential proxy service. The operation, conducted in coordination with international partners, seized infrastructure used by the operators to sell proxy access to cybercriminals, enabling them to mask their location while committing fraud, conducting credential stuffing attack, and running scams. The botnet had been active since at least 2020 and represented one of the largest residential proxy networks dismantled by law enforcement. And now, here are this week's notable breaches. Intuitive Surgical, the American company behind the Da Vinci robotic surgery system with the total number of affected individuals undisclosed. The breach was detected after a targeted phishing attack allowed an unauthorized third party to access internal IT business applications using a compromised employee account, and it consists of exposed customer contact details, employee data, and corporate information. The company confirmed that its Da Vinci, Ion, and digital surgery platforms were not affected, as the network is segmented and keeps internal IT systems completely separate from manufacturing and surgical infrastructure. Operations and customer support continue as normal. The city of Los Angeles, with 159.9 gigabytes of data claimed stolen across 779 files. The breach was claimed by the WorldLeaks ransomware group, formerly known as Handers International, which rebranded after law enforcement pressure and shifted entirely from file encryption to pure data theft and extortion. And it consists of an intrusion into city systems that also disrupted the Los Angeles Metro Transit Agency, forcing station arrival displays offline and preventing riders from adding funds to tap cards online. 2 Bay Area cities, including Foster City, simultaneously declared states of emergency following separate ransomware attacks on their municipal systems. Trivy, the widely used open-source vulnerability scanner developed by Aqua Security and integrated into thousands of CI/CD pipelines with the number of affected organizations undisclosed. The breach was carried out through a compromised GitHub action workflow in the official Trivy repository that injected malicious scripts into the build process, and it consists of credential stealing payloads embedded in the scanner's own toolchain, meaning organizations that ran Trivy scans during the window of compromise may have had their environment secrets and credentials exfiltrated silently. Navia Benefit Solutions, with 2,697,540 individuals affected. The breach occurred between December 22, 2025 and January 15, 2026 through unauthorized access to the company's systems detected on January 23, 2026, and it consists of exposed names, dates of birth, social security numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, and benefits enrollment data, including health reimbursement arrangements, flexible spending accounts, and COBRA information. No claims of financial data were exposed. Navia is offering 12 months of free identity protection and credit monitoring through Kroll to all affected individuals. Aura, the digital security and identity protection company with approximately 900,000 records exposed. The breach was carried out through a targeted phone phishing attack against a single employee, whose account was compromised for approximately 1 hour before security teams detected and terminated the session. And it consists primarily of names and email addresses from a legacy marketing database acquired in 2021. With a smaller subset of under 35,000 active and former customers also having home addresses and phone numbers exposed. Highly sensitive data such as social security numbers, payment details, and passwords remained fully protected due to encryption and strict access controls. Aura has notified law enforcement and is contacting affected individuals. And now, here are this week's notable vulnerabilities. Ubuntu Desktop on versions 24.04 and later, the CVE is CVE 2026-3888 with a CVSS score of 7.8, and it consists of a local privilege escalation flaw discovered by the Qualys Threat Research Unit that exploits a timing interaction between snapconfine and systemd TMP files. An attacker waits for this cleanup daemon to delete a key temporary directory, which takes 10 to 30 days depending on the Ubuntu version, then recreates it with malicious files. When snapconfine next initializes the sandbox, it mounts those files as root, giving the attacker full system compromise. GNU inet utils telnetd on all versions through 2.7. The CVE is CVE 2026-32-74-6 with a CVSS score of 9.8, and it consists of a critical unpatched buffer overflow in the line mode set local characters sub-option handler that allows an unauthenticated remote attacker to execute arbitrary code as root via port 23. Before any login prompt even appears, no credentials required, no user interaction needed. Since telnetd typically runs as root under inetd or xinetd, successful exploitation gives the attacker full control. A patch is expected by April 1st, 2026. Until then, disable the service if not needed, block port 23 at the firewall, and isolate any telnet access. Amazon Bedrock Agent Core Code Interpreter, LangSmith, and SGLang on multiple versions. The CVEs are CVE 2026-3059 and CVE 2026-3060, both with a CVSS score of 9.8 for SGLang, CVE 2026-3989 with a CVSS score of 7.8 for SGLang, and CVE 2026-25750 with a CVSS score of 8.5 for LangSmith. Amazon Bedrock has no CVE assigned, but carries a CVSS score of 7.5, and it consists of multiple critical flaws across AI infrastructure platforms. SGLang is vulnerable to unauthenticated remote code execution via unsafe pickle deserialization over 0MQ and remain unpatched. LangSmith has a URL parameter injection flaw that allows token theft and account takeover through a crafted link. Patched in version 0.12.71, an Amazon Bedrock sandboxed code interpreter allows outbound DNS queries that attackers can abuse to establish command and control channels and exfiltrate data, bypassing what is advertised as a network isolation. A reminder that AI infrastructure is now critical attack surface. Kubernetes CSI driver for NFS on all versions prior to v4.13.1. The CVE is 2026-3864 with a CVSS score of 6.5, and it consists of a path traversal vulnerability where insufficient validation of the subtier parameter allows an attacker with persistent volume creation privileges to craft malicious volume identifiers that cause the driver to traverse outside intended directories and delete or modify unintended data on NFS servers. Upgrade to v4.13.1 or later and restrict persistent volume creation to trusted users. Wing FTP server on all versions prior to 7.4.4. The CVE is CVE 2025-47-81-3 with a CVSS score of 4.3, and it consists of an information disclosure vulnerability that leaks the full local installation path of the application through verbose error messages, triggered by an oversized UID cookie value. While medium severity on its own, CySA has added it to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog on March 16th and reports it is being actively exploited. Likely chained with CVE 2025-47-812, a critical remote code execution flaw, patched in the same v7.4.4 release. Microsoft SharePoint on versions prior to the February 2026 Patch Tuesday update. The CVE is 2025-53770 with a CVSS score of 9.8, and it consists of a critical server-side request forgery flaw that allows an unauthenticated attacker to gain full system-level privileges on the SharePoint server. CySA has added it to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog on March 18th, confirming active in the wild exploitation. Federal agencies must patch by April 8, 2026. On all premises, SharePoint deployments should be treated as critically exposed until patched. Cisco Firepower Management Center on version 7.0 through 7.6.0. The CVE is CVE 2026-20-131 with a CVSS score of 9.9, and it consists of a critical SQL injection vulnerability in the web-based management interface that allows an authenticated remote attacker to execute arbitrary command on the underlying operating system with root privileges. Critically, the Interlock ransomware group had been exploiting this vulnerability as a zero-day for 36 days before Cisco disclosed it, meaning organizations were exposed with no official patch available during that entire window. Darksword iOS exploit kit targeting iPhone devices running iOS version 16.0 through 17.4.1. The CVE covers 6 distinct flaws chained together. CVE 2026-10-188, CVE 2026-10-189, CVE 2026-10-190, CVE 2026-10-191, CVE 2026-10-192, and CVE 2026-10-193, with individual CVSS scores ranging from 7.5 to 9.8, and it consists of a sophisticated 6-flaw exploit chain being actively used in the wild to deploy InfoStealer malware on iPhones without any user interaction. The chain starts with a WebKit flaw triggered by visiting a malicious page, then escalates through the kernel to achieve full device compromise. Apple has patched these in iOS 17.4.2 and iOS 16.7.8. Update your iPhone immediately. Zimbra Collaboration Suite on versions prior to 9.0.0 patch 44 and 10.0.0 patch 19. The CVE is CVE 2025-66376 with a CVSS score of 6.1. and it consists of a cross-site scripting flaw in the web client that allows attackers to inject malicious JavaScript by sending a specially crafted email. Russian state-sponsored APT actors have been actively exploiting this flaw to compromise Ukrainian governments and critical infrastructure email accounts, extracting sensitive correspondence. CySA added it to KeyEV on March 18th. The flaw has also been used by other threat actors globally to steal session tokens and pivot into victim networks. An Iran-linked botnet tracked as Leomedes on multiple router and IoT firmware versions. The CVE covers multiple unspecified identifiers, and it consists of a widespread campaign exploiting known and patched vulnerabilities in consumer and enterprise routers to build a large residential proxy network used to conduct cyber espionage operations against targets in the Middle East and Europe. The botnet's infrastructure is being used to obfuscate the origin of intrusion attempts against government and defense networks. Affected device owners should check for firmware updates and consider factory resetting and reconfiguring affected hardware. ConnectWise Screen Connect on all versions prior to 26.1. The CVE is CVE 2026-3564 with a CVSS score of 9.0, and it consists of a critical flaw stemming from improper verification of cryptographic signatures. where machine keys are stored unprotected in the server configuration files. An attacker who gains any degree of server access can extract these keys and use them to forge session authentication tokens, effectively hijacking any active remote session and gaining unauthenticated access to all connected endpoints. ConnectWise has classified this as a Priority 1 emergency patch. Cloud-hosted customers are already protected. On-premise administrators must upgrade to version 26.1 immediately. Following the Striker attack, CISA has issued an urgent advisory warning all organizations to audit and harden their Microsoft Intune deployments. Specifically, CISA is urging organizations to enforce strict role-based access controls on global administrator accounts, enable phishing-resistant MFA for all privileged identities, monitor for unexpected bulk wipe commands on new administrator account creation, restrict Intune wipe capabilities to named devices only, and review conditional access policies to prevent unauthorized access even when credentials are compromised. The Striker incident demonstrated that a single compromised admin account can destroy tens of thousands of devices in under 3 hours using only built-in Microsoft tooling. No malware required. Magento and Adobe Commerce on versions 2.4.7 and below. The CVE is CVE 2026-35224 with a CVSS score of 9.8 and it consists of a critical unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability via a new attack class called Polyshell, a technique that abuses PHP's file upload handling to inject server-side shell commands disguised as image files. Attackers can gain full control of an e-commerce server with a single HTTP request. Exploits are already circulating publicly and over 7,500 Magento sites have already been defaced in a related mass hacking campaign this week. Apply Adobe's emergency patch immediately. Langflow on versions prior to 1.4.2, the CVE is CVE 2026-33017 with a CVSS score of 9.8 and it consists of a critical unauthenticated remote code execution flaw in the AI Workflow Builder's API endpoint that evaluates Python expressions without proper sandboxing. The vulnerability was disclosed and actively exploited within the same 20-hour window, making it one of the fastest weaponized disclosures of the year. Given that Langflow is widely used to build and deploy AI agents in enterprise environments, the blast radius of a successful exploit could extend to connected AI infrastructure and data sources. Unisoc T612 modem on all affected firmware versions. The CVE is CVE 2026-3589 with a CVSS score of 9.8 and it consists of a critical remote code execution vulnerability exploitable via malicious cellular calls. No user interaction required. The T612 modem chip is found in a significant number of Android devices in the budget to mid-range segment, particularly popular in Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe. A successful exploit grants the attacker full control of the baseband processor, which can then be used to intercept calls and messages, track location, or pivot into the main OS. Device manufacturers using the T612 chip must release firmware updates urgently. Atlassian Bamboo Data Center and Server on version 10.0.0 through 10.2.4, the CVE is 2026-21271 with a CVSS score of 8.5, and it consists of a high-severity remote code execution flaw in the CI/CD platform agent communication channel that allows an unauthenticated attacker on the same network to execute arbitrary code on the Bamboo server, given that Bamboo is typically deployed in sensitive build environments with access to source code, signing keys, and deployment credentials. Successful exploitation could compromise an entire software supply chain. Atlassian has released patched versions. Ubiquiti Unify Network Application. On versions prior to 9.1.1, the CVE is CVE 2026-22-193 with a CVSS score of 9.3, and it consists of a critical authentication bypass that allows an unauthenticated attacker to take over any Unify account by exploiting a flaw in the password reset flow that fails to properly validate reset tokens. An attacker who knows a target's email address can trigger the reset flow and intercept or brute force the token to gain full administrative access to the account and all associated network devices. Ubiquiti has patched in version 9.1.1. Jenkins on versions prior to 2.503 for weekly and 2.492.3 for LTS. The CVEs are CVE 2026-29-869, CVE 2026-29-870, CVE 2026-29-871, and CVE 2026-29-872, with the most severe carrying a CVSS score of 9.0, and it consists of multiple critical vulnerabilities, including an unauthenticated remote code execution flaw via the Jenkins CLI, a stored cross-site scripting vulnerability in the build log viewer, and 2 privilege escalation flaws in the agent-to-controller communication channel. Jenkins is used as an estimated 45% of all CI/CD pipelines globally, making this a very high-impact patch cycle. And that wraps up this week's Cyber News. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on next week's episode. Also, if you have any suggestions or remarks to provide, do not hesitate to leave a comment down below. As always, the links for all the news and the timestamps associated are available in the video's description box. Stay safe online and see you next week.